This president has already signed the largest increase in military spending in nearly a decade, and before this year is out, we'll enact the largest investment in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan.
Vice President Pence this morning at Arlington making a Veterans Day with a promise to those currently in uniform, his son among them, that their country will give them the funding they need to keep us safe. Brian Bender, defense editor at Politico, joining us now. Brian, good to see you as always. You know, for a while, especially during the Cold War, military funding was nonpartisan. Then you went through the 1990s, especially into the 2000s with the Iraq War. Military funding and the sequester became a very partisan issue. Are we back now to agreement that this needs to happen to give our military a lot more money?
I think we are, and I'm not sure that there was as much disagreement even over the sequester and the caps on spending. There's a large segment of Republicans and Democrats in the House and Senate who believe that the military is overstretched. The military needs more money, and that there's a lot of bills coming due in the future to replace a lot of this aging equipment. So I think there is agreement.
Well, pretty stunning when you had one of the more senior senators, who's somebody who has an enormous amount of national security knowledge and experience, not even know some of the places that American troops were in harm's way. So that says a lot. This graphic of military mishaps in 2017, the military calls them mishaps, although it was ships running into each other, planes crashing, among other things, all relating and resulting in U.S. service deaths. Everyone will say the military is overstretched. It at times is antiquated. We're dealing with equipment that's older than the people who are either flying them or driving them. How bad is it? Is Humpty Dumpty fallen off the wall or about to fall off the wall?
I don't know that we're at the point of no return. In other words, I think there are clearly cracks. There's clearly strain, and it's starting to show. I mean, we've been at war for 17 years. Or at least the military's been at war. I don't know that the country feels like it's been at war. But less than 1% of the population, which makes up the military, all volunteers, effectively a Praetorian Guard, a professional warrior class, has been at it for years. And
the equipment's been at it for years, too.
Longer than, like you said, many of them have been alive. So I think there's cracks. They're starting to show. I think even senior military leaders will say these mishaps, maybe they're not directly related to readiness problems, as they call them, but there are second and third order effects of pushing this equipment, pushing these people over and over again. Eventually something's got to give.
Well, we heard from the Chief of Naval Operations saying that there were some very bad habits that people had gotten into, and part of that was because the sailors were overstretched. But it brings up a larger question. If an airline had 4 or 5 crashes in a year, they'd be getting a new CEO. If a cruise ship company had 2 or 3 of its boats run into things and run aground and run into other ships, they'd be getting a new CEO. Is senior military leadership worried that at some point they're going to be facing some really tough questions if these kinds of mishaps, accidents continue?
I mean, I think so. But, you know, let's not forget that there are military crashes, accidents, training deaths every year. And there have been
more dying in training deaths, though, than are dying in combat.
Right, but the idea that there are never plane crashes, there are never mishaps, I mean, that happens all the time. I do think the numbers are higher, the concern is higher. But, you know, in the end, you know, the Constitution gives Congress the role to raise armies. And the Congress really hasn't dealt with this issue. I mean, they have not lifted the budget caps. Right. They talk about doing it. They've passed, or they're about to pass, a defense authorization bill that is, as the vice president says, much larger than before, but they still haven't figured out how to pay for it.
Right.
So until they do that, I mean, it's hard to blame just the military leadership.
Well, and noteworthy what you're saying is that there's so many congressmen who love saying this, so many politicians, the vice president among them, who said, hey, look, we're going to give you more money. Giving them more money, though, has become a sticking point. Brian, great conversation. Thank you, as always. We'll look for your reporting in Politico.